Welcome back to Hooligan Nation, a KISS-Centric podcast. I'm Anthony.
And I'm Rocco.
This week, we're back for another bonus segment of all new material.
I've never said Paul's my favorite member of the band, but I respect so much what he's done and what he's given us. But he is definitely a super, super underrated frontman. You know, Gene is obviously big time with the vocals through the history, but Paul brings it. He is a showman.
He always was.
Yeah, but like you said, you made me think of from that perspective. Like, I don't think he was ever respected as a frontman because they were always looked at as four separate characters for the most part, especially in their, in the beginning. But he's always been that frontman persona.
And not to get too far in the weeds, but I think he specifically was pretty happy with that until Ace and Peter left the band, and then Gene checked out and he was doing all the work. And the longer time goes on, the more that it comes out and becomes widely known that this became a real problem to him, and Gene could have cared less. And there's stories going around about Paul going to Gene and saying, "Hey, this is supposed to be a partnership. I'm doing all the work." And Gene responding, "Oh, I can understand why you feel like that, but that's it."
Wow. Listen, the bond that those two have is legendary for them to be able to keep it together all these years. But make no mistake about it, I guarantee they've almost come to blows many times and they've had major fights, because if you look at those two guys' personality, they are polar opposites in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah. The only real similarity between the two of them is their drive
100%.
and their work ethic. Other than that, they couldn't have been more of polar opposites. For Paul, the band always came first. It seems like for Gene, the band was a vehicle for other things. I don't quite know that anyone's wrong in that. I don't think that Paul's wrong for putting the band first, and quite honestly, I don't think Gene's wrong for being part of something that reaches a level that allows him to go do other, let's say, bucket list things. I want to try to act in movies. I want to try to manage other bands. I want to try to produce records.
I mean, you got to respect his ambition, but at the same time,
oh, come on, let's be serious, dude. His ambition was money.
But that's again, we go back to the drive, but that's still ambition. I mean, listen, you're already a money machine with KISS, and you have aspiration. If you have something in you that makes you want to try something, it shouldn't sacrifice the band. But I mean,
very much seems like it sacrificed the band. Well, I mean, all you got to do is listen to the Gene songs in the mid '80s, and
yeah,
he was sacrificing the band. Now, whether he knew he was or he didn't know he was, that's for Gene to answer, and I doubt we'll ever get an accurate answer.
Well, let me ask you this question: what if it's something he's always had desire to do, and he wanted to get while he was young, he wanted to try to take it. He had an opportunity. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't want to let that pass him by if he had it in him.
Honestly, I mean, look, my opinion is this. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have to prioritize the band.
Yeah,
and the band has to come first. Now, I imagine that
or in the very least, you got to make sure that you're on the same page with Paul. He deserves that much.
Look, this isn't all Gene's fault. The amount of work that KISS was doing at the time from 1973 all the way up until like 1989, dude, they were pumping out 1 or 2 records a year touring every year, it in a normal band situation, especially today, but in a normal band situation, there would have been time to maybe do multiple things. The way KISS worked, m more specifically, guessing the way Paul Stanley wanted to work, it made, filming a movie probably very much impossible. If you look back to the last 10, 15, 20 years, Paul and Gene have the time. Paul can go on a solo tour. Gene can go on a solo tour. Paul can go do a play. Gene can go do whatever else it is that Gene does. Like they had the time, but as of 1987, 1988, there's no time to stand around. You went in the studio, you recorded the record, you then went out on tour. While you were out on tour, you wrote songs for the next record. And when you got off a tour, you went in the studio and you made another record and then you went out on tour. When like when's this dude supposed to do something other than Kiss? Now, the other half of that is if that's the way it's going to be, then again, a fan's opinion is he should have chosen Kiss first, or they should have changed their schedule, how they did it. But they didn't, and they made it through. Uh, Sometimes it amazes me how they made it through and the fact that they did make it through, but they made it through. But at least to me, little cracks are getting bigger at this point. And we all know that Gene returns in 91 for revenge. Like we all know that now. But at
You know
the
what?
time, we didn't know that. And look, I'm not at the time, I was a kid. That's 1987. I was 13, I was 12, 13, 14 years old. I had no clue that there was this kind of divide in the band. And I read all the Hit Parader, Cream, Kerrang, all the magazines. I don't ever remember there being any article in there with Paul Stanley saying, "Well, Gene's never around," or Gene saying, I'm filming movies and I don't have time
I
to."
think between the two of them, I think he it's obvious that even she was probably pissing him off to no end. That's where the bond is. Like they kept a lot of their shit they kept in house between the two of them.
Well, it's very much out there. It's very much out there now.
Now, but I'm
Paul
saying
has said,
at the time though, I think that especially I think honestly, Ace and Peter leaving, they got even closer as far as the commitment to each other in some sort of ways, even though Gene was branching out. You know what I mean? But it's kind of interesting. I'm going in a different direction now too, but I gotta say this because it's spinning in my head. What I find interesting is where they are today. And I know Paul, out of necessity, had to kind of like bow out because he can't do it anymore. But Gene's the one who I know money is a driving force, but Gene can't let go of being on stage. And Paul has come to terms with it.
is it, and we are completely off the subject, but is it Gene can't live without being on stage? Or is it that Gene knows that he can continue to compile money?
I don't think it's just a money grab, honestly. I think it's an ego thing. I think he likes the attention. He likes the attention on stage.
Oh, I'm sure he likes the attention on stage. I mean, you perform for 50 years, I'm sure, but is that the driving force?
I think it
Or
has to be a part of it. Otherwise, you at his age, if it's all about money, it's not like you know what I mean? Like I can't all be about money.
remember that statement that you brought up in a past podcast that Gene made the statement that when you get towards the end of the race, do you slow down or do you speed
And
up?
I love that. That's a great statement.
Well, Gene, it applies to making money also.
Yeah, but don't you think at that age, listen, I'm 54. I feel it every single day. You're 50. He's 70. Like, I think there's a part of him,
Well,
like
he's
it's
75.
right, but it's got to be a little bit of a fear. It's got to be a little bit of a fear of like, I don't want to just not be able to do things. It's probably him like holding on, like at that age.
Hey, let me ask you a question.
What do you got?
Do you YouTube?
I'm always on YouTube.
When you YouTube, how do you support the YouTubers that you like?
If I find something I dig, I subscribe to it and I hit like right away.
That's a great idea. I'm sure the creators appreciate your support.
I would think so.
You think maybe now's a good time to ask everyone in the audience to support us?
Absolutely.
To everyone in the audience, please subscribe to our little channel. And while you're there, hit the like button.
We're enjoying what we're doing and we want to continue to grow the hooligan community.
We appreciate all your support.
Absolutely.
I think the money shtick, God, I hope some of it is shtick. I mean, the estimates of Gene's net worth are somewhere between $300 and $600 million. If you're 75 years old and you have $600 million sitting in the bank and you're getting on a plane to fly across country to play a casino on the East Coast just for money, you have a screw loose.
There's also another little nugget to think about. I love Paul, but this is my house now. We're doing it my way. I don't need to hear it from anybody else. I'm going to have some fun doing this without having anybody else to go through. It must have been some of that must have wore on him over time with Paul's drive and on that end of it too. It must be a little bit freeing.
Well, everything that I've always heard and read was that Paul never gave up being the boss. Gene just understood that he was number two.
Regardless of all the other shit and him checking out, it shows how tight even though Paul like basically said he didn't do nothing or whatever, it still shows how strong a bond they had.
You know, I just don't get that from that. What I get is Gene woke up one morning and said, holy shit, I've been checked out for almost 10 years and it's time for me to check back in. And when he checked back in, the balance of power had changed. And instead of fighting and probably, and look, this probably is accurate, instead of fighting and ultimately probably breaking up and destroying KISS at what would have been the absolute worst time, 1991-92, pre-reunion, Gene walked in and said, yeah, and this is all just me being a fan and guessing. So, but I can imagine Gene walking in and going, yeah, I did this to myself. So this guy's the boss now. All right, well, he's been the boss for the last 10 years and we're still here. So
it goes to show you that, like, again, band's marriage, right? History means an awful lot. History sometimes makes you find a way to make it work no matter what happens, no matter what goes on. You have history with a person, you have history in a band or whatever, no matter, you know what I'm saying? Like, their history is what kept them together, what kept it together.
And I don't believe that they ever lost the mutual business respect for
Bingo.
each other.
Bingo.
Like, Paul's, I think Paul's second wedding, Gene wasn't invited.
I didn't know that.
He wasn't invited, and Paul has, I believe, has gone on record as saying that, Gene had come out at the time and was crazy with saying that he didn't believe in marriage and he didn't believe in this and that, so Paul didn't invite him to the wedding. But they never let that affect the business relationship. If it's too loud, you're too old. Peace out, Hooligan Nation.